Jax. Welcome to the Dark Night of the Soul Unwrapped.
Thank you. I'm really excited, so thank you.
Great, me too. My first question is usually what was happening in your life around the time your Dark Night of the Soul began, and I do want to come to that. But we were just having a couple of minutes before we came on, and it felt like what you were saying was so important. I wanted to sort of reverse the order and jump in with that. We were talking about how much the sheer physicality of our bodies has been left out of the mind-body-spirit equation. And yeah, I'd love to start with your thoughts on that.
Thank you, my love. I think I want to share like the backdrop to how we got there, which was simply that we were just doing that thing, which is where we inquire how the other is. And I was lucky enough to play yesterday with my 18-year-old and 22-year-old children. And we went to an escape room and we were in Alice in Wonderland land. And it was so much fun. And then we just started to talk about kind of bodies and play and just realizing, well, one of the things that I've realized in kind of all the work that I'm now involved in is I know we're talking a lot about kind of, we now know so much more about trauma and how we hold it in our bodies and how kind of everything from an ancestral perspective sits and lives in us. And we can prove that now. Those of us that have always been quite sensitive to this kind of knew that, but they can now prove it. So it's all really good that it can be proved. And one of the things a beautiful friend of mine said, she said, what's really beautiful about the world starting to realize that we are a world, and I know it's really slow progress, is that the East brought in kind of spirituality. We had that from the East. And the West was all about the mind and cognition. And Africa and South America to an extent as well. But those continents were all about the body. They knew about the body intimately. And so as we kind of, and I suppose that's what I love about what you're doing and what we're talking about, which is this dark night of the soul, which is effectively a place of kind of going to the depth and coming back out again and kind of rebirth. Kind of like it's like a remembering of who we are. And then that's extrapolated to the wider world. And when we look at it, it's like, oh no, we forgot Africa. We just forgot everything they did. And when we remember, I love the timing of remembering and our bodies and remembering that the physicality of our bodies. Look to Africa. Look how they do it. And so for me, that's kind of part of the work that I'm kind of exploring, which is just like, what is it to be in a body? Not just the sensory experience, but the physicality, the strength, the magnificence of this vehicle that we get to walk in.
I love that so much. I think it's very easy to have a sense of the body as the bearer of trauma. You know, when we talk about it's in our bodies, of course, absolutely, there's a deep, deep reality to that. But it feels like in the doing of that, there can still be an objectifying the body as the holder of things that we can then do something with to alleviate its burdens. But there's still essentially a sort of coloniality in that, in seeing it as this object that we then need to do something with, that we need to heal it, we need to make it better in some way. And I think what you just said is so great because it moves it further down that line in saying, no, the body has its own agency. It is its own being. The strength, the fabulousness of it, I think is something that we tend to get cut off from. And I think there's something about the way that not just I think certainly it's a Western thing, but I think it's also a white thing. And as women, we tend to hold this very subtle view of ourselves often as somehow fragile. You know, as I'm talking, I get the word dainty, which is not a word that comes up very often. And I've certainly seen this in myself, like a subtle disowning of my own strengths. You just use the word magnificence in all kinds of different ways. You know, I think that happens through spirituality. It happens through the diet culture that that we tend to be immersed in, in the wellness world in all sorts of different ways, and to bring ourselves back to the sheer beingness of our body and all of the different kinds of energy that can be in it, so that we're not holding it solely as the site of damage, but as the site of all sorts of other things too, miraculousness and creativity and, yeah, energetic flow.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing that kind of indigenous populations, I mean, I'm really kind of in the depth of learning about my African heritage at the moment, so it's really important to me to like be in this conversation. And one of the things that we have kind of lost in traditions is our association with our ancestors. And so yes, the body holding of trauma, but the fact that we're here means that there were many gifts that were given to us down that ancestral line, right? The fact that these bodies are as magnificent as they are, like all of those that stand behind us, like being in reverence to them, yeah? Being in reverence to all of them, because, and I'm never very good at remembering quotes at all, but we are the product of their dreams. I mean, when they were dreaming, they were thinking of us. And when we're cut off from that, we're kind of cut off from all that went before, and the resilience and robustness of what it is to be in a body, you know?
Absolutely. And I think there are ways of, I think for me, one of the ways that I understand the Dark Night now,
Mm.
particularly, I think this was sort of not really conscious to me fully when I was in it, is a reconnection with that. No, that when I think we start to have these experiences of that energy coming in, and we know very clearly what it is we're reconnecting with. We have that felt sense of what's coming through our ancestral line in all the ways that things come through, and we're acknowledging it as that. I've certainly had experiences of feeling my ancestors going, "Oh, right, finally, great."
She's here.
She's beginning to see it. Yes,
She's
exactly.
here.
She's
Woo!
here.
She already got here.
Yes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I kind of just going back and kind of just bringing in kind of the way the West, whiteness, all of that has worked. So my dark night of the soul was, and I think because I feel like it's a spiral. I just feel like there's a continuous spiral, and I'm still taken to my knees, but I have a way of being in the world that enables me to do it slightly differently each time. There's more there's more robustness in the whole experience that I've learnt from, and there's more I'm trying to think of the word, because it's like I'm able to dance with it now. Like whereas it kind of was so painful before, I could do nothing but be in bed with it. There's been like moments now where I still am brought to my knees, and I'm literally on the floor praying, and I find that I can move through so much more quickly, and it can be a dance, and I can like harvest the gifts so much more quickly, and then I can be back in it. Really, it just, the whole thing just spirals so much more quickly. Is how I kind of feel it. But my dark night of the soul was really when my daughter tried to take her own life about 3 times. But the reason before, and I know you'll probably have questions around that, but I really just mention it just because there was this moment where um, she was hearing voices. And there was this real moment inside me where I knew that she didn't need to be medicated for that. Um, there was what just kept happening whilst I was tending to my daughter was so much like, I was having a dark night of the soul whilst needing to tend to my daughter, and intuitively knowing what I needed to do, which was completely the opposite of what I was being told to do. You need to medicate her because her voices are so loud. And I'm thinking, I think our voices are there because they're trying to tell us something. Like, I was like, everything. It was like, we need to medicate her because we're not. And there was just so much. Let's put her on antipsychotics. No, we're not doing that. she's 14. And I'm going to take her home and I'm going to look after her and tend to her. So it kind of felt like that there were voices talking to us on so many levels, so many of those that walk with us. If we're able, if that's the language that we will use, in that I hear as voices when I hear, when my intuition comes to me. And I believe my daughter was experiencing exactly the same. And they were ancestral and they were whatever people deem them to be. But for me, they were those that stand with me and walk with me, supporting me to remember what is possible when I'm just in tune with life.
Beautifully put. You said at the beginning, remembering who we are. And that's where I come back to when you describe what was happening in the tending to your daughter, that there's something, however we think of that, there's such a powerful longing and pull in that remembering, in my experience, that is so deeply visceral. My sense is that includes the things that we think of as sort of extra rational, if that's a word, the imaginal, the other kinds of voices that are coming in, as well as what's happening in our bodies. And that sometimes that call to remember who we are can feel disruptive. That it can come into somebody's life or into lives in a way that will be sometimes construed as destructive even, but certainly disruptive. And what a gift that you saw it for what it was, and not as something that needed to be quiet or silenced or got rid of.
It's an interesting, it's been a very interesting experience in that I think there were parts of me that really wanted it to be silent and got rid of because the frame of life that I live in meant that made us different, made her different, made me different, made and that idea of being on the outside of what everyone else is doing, that idea of difference at that level was quite difficult for me to get my head round. And it's only kind of like having the labels now, both of us now have the labels now of ADHD, autistic and ADHD, that I can now sense make of that. I can now sense make that period. Because I think part of why it was so difficult for me was because I wasn't prepared to lean fully into it at the time. Because it was, I think for me, a dark night of the soul is an experience of the wrestling with what's trying to speak to you. And so there was an awful lot of no, 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 no. No, I want to be like everybody else. I don't want to be different because I'd learned to mask for so many years. I had no idea there were no labels like this. Yeah. So when my daughter came along and she was like angelic in her showing me. So she was one of the biggest voices there were. There were intuitive voices coming in, but my daughter and her explicit need to be, she couldn't be any other way. She didn't fit. And then when she couldn't fit anymore, she didn't want to be here anymore because the world didn't make any sense to her. And so she was the one that brought me to my knees and allowed me to see what was happening within me. She became like the biggest mirror because it was like, oh, everything that was happening for her was also happening for me, but I wasn't able to see that because I just needed her to be normal. And so the dark night of the soul was me being brought to my knees to show me that I was just like her. We were different and we had to listen. And then the voices started pouring in and they've been pouring in ever since.
Yes. I mean, that being on our knees and wrestling in a sense, what we're being asked, what's being asked of us. I think that perfectly sums up what the dark night is. And certainly for me, mine was different in the sense that it wasn't directly in relationship with somebody else, certainly in the intensity of it. But that wrestling, as you describe, between what's normal, quotes, and what actually wants to happen, I think is so profound. And And there's a word that's been coming up for me repeatedly is the word untamed. You know, that we're moving from this state of having been domesticated in all of these different ways, you know, whether we call that conditioned or colonized, or and we're moving in, I think in the Dark Night it's really the beginning of the wrestling with the unraveling of that, and what that means very specifically in each of us individually, depending on who we are and how we're embodied, and overcoming, or not even overcoming, but wrestling with the shame inherent in that difference that now wants to show itself, that this being wants to be what it is. And I think there's such a kind of howl from within of, as you said with your daughter, like, let me be this, when so much is telling us, like, oh, you should be that. And here are the ways that we'll give you in order to make you be that.
I love that. And in Untamed, and I'm just with the word wild, as you say it. I mean, like, there's a wildness to us, and we forget that we are animal. And I think as we kind of start, I suppose, if we were to talk about where we started this conversation, it was remember the animal. You know, remember the animal that you are. Remember there's a body and it needs to do what it needs to do. And we are so busy, and I love the word dainty, you know, but it seems like it's been packaged in the world that we've been given. And you mentioned like our kind of gender, like from a female perspective, it's been like we've been packaged, you know, the conditioning is like a package that we've been put into, and it looks like this and it wears this and and actually there's like what's just coming forth now is this wildness. That's what I noticed in her. That's what I noticed in myself. I mean, I kind of like tag all of that now with the fact that I'm still bleeding as a perimenopausal woman. And that's another initiation which brings you down back on your knees again.
It certainly does.
So there's,
Yeah.
and that's just like an initiation into your wildness. And like just watching the beauty of both experiences, because my daughter's now 22, how the crisis that I see them in now, that I see them experiencing, that I see kind of her crisis was her trying to step into her wildness. And it just, for me, feels like it happens a lot younger now because they know so much more and they're so ready.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking back to what you said about reconnecting with Africa and what hasn't been seen, what's been invisible or actually deliberately obscured
Mm.
in
Mm.
so many ways, and how that relates to what we were saying about coming back to our creature selves
Mm.
and the African understanding of that. Is there more that you'd say about
I
your
mean,
discoveries with that?
it's just, there was, I mean, I just wanted to share something that just made me laugh about my own conditioning the other day. So I did the beautiful thing, which was the burning 12. There were 13 wishes and burning them over Yule, and and then you come, and then I don't know if you've heard that as a tradition, but you burn them every single night for 12 nights. You start with 13, burn them for 12 nights, and then at the end, the one that you're left with is the one that you're to focus on for the year. So the one that I was left with was use shamanic tools in your work. You need a drum and you need to work with the earth. And so I went off looking for where I could birth a drum. And it was so clear that the idea of that was supposed to be, then I wasn't finding anywhere and I wasn't coming across any. And I do a beautiful dance, which is something that is really speaking to me. I do a dance which is called ancestral connections, which is where we use kind of constellations to dance with our ancestors. And ever since I've been doing that, when I dance with my paternal line, my feet start to move in a way which is not mine. I don't even know what dance they're asking me to do. And I'm dancing and I'm like, how is that possible? And my mother's line's Celtic, she's Irish. And I can just feel in my body, these aren't moves that I know how to do. My body just does them. But anyway, last week, I was doing this dance and there was such clear kind of like words coming through. You need to get a djembe. why are you looking at the shamanic drums? Why aren't you getting a djembe? Why wasn't, and I was just like, that's it in a nutshell, right? How conditioned I am into just going, oh, shamanism means this. Like, being with the earth means this. And it didn't even occur to me. And so I just give that as an example, how far away even I am from even that knowledge myself. And yeah, so that was just me kind of showing you that I went off to birth the drum, and that those drum ceremonies are typically using kind of Native American ceremony. Great, yeah, it's beautiful, and that's not what I'm to do, what I want to bring, how I want to do stuff differently.
Absolutely. Because I think there's something for me about when the dark night of the soul brings us to our knees and begins to open us up to some kind of receptivity of all of this, even in amongst the wrestling. I think we get to see more and more how it comes. It is about the specificity of how it comes through us. And that feels so important, that it's not going to be something that is able to be commodified or taken off a shelf somewhere, that it is going to be kind of rigorous and relentless in saying to us, no, this is about you and your very specific embodiment. I mean, for me, it's interesting. I relate to the Celtic part because that's half of my heritage. And I found myself in the years after the Dark Night being drawn to learning Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic. And so there's something, I think, in that we can't get away with doing what you just described.
There's no
In a
masking
sense,
here.
isn't it? No, exactly.
No.
Because every time we try and do that, it's like there's a kind of slap or a tug back into the right direction, as it
It's a really,
were, isn't it?
and it gets louder, yeah, it's just so loud because something else that came out of that dance last week was so, so important. So an ancestor came forth, an African ancestor came forth and started to speak, and spoke, as you say, really specifically, and has tasked me with every single experience where there's more than one to wherever there's more than one. So if I'm in a group in this situation, to make sure that there's an invocation at the end where the power of a collective experience, of a kind of co-created experience, is given to everyone. So it's, how can this be for the best good of all? So basically I was tasked with, everything that you've been doing has been great. These individual experiences that you've been exploring, great. But no, that's not what 2026 is about for you. It's about walking into every single room that you're in, no matter who's in there, no matter who's facilitating, whether it's you or another, and saying at the end, may everything that we have done here be collectively for the greatest good of all. That is so specific that I spent last week in the groups I was in, because this came out of last Wednesday, a session that I had, this dance. And so I've been in groups where I've gone, excuse me, I know you want to finish, but is it possible I can just do this invocation? But for me, that's everything that kind of, as I now kind of lean into this, I'm going to go on a pilgrimage to Benin and Togo. I'm going to go to the Voodoo Festival in 2027. I really want to learn about all of the spiritual traditions in Western Africa that were kind of taken away from my people, from my father's people, who ended up in Guyana and were given Christianity. So there's so much to learn. And I am so interested in voodoo spirituality, because we've been told it's devil worship, and I know that it's not. And so I really want to explore that. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited about where I'm going this year, as far as I'm doing a pilgrimage to Ireland, and I'm doing a pilgrimage to West Africa, Benin and Togo and Ghana. And I really just want to like immerse myself in those worlds so that I can actually learn. And my kind of tiny little baby steps are just going to be, not just going to be around, just remembering that the power of us as individuals, when we remember that, and then we remember the collective, even just you and I here, if we can take what we create and just give it to everybody, how powerful is that?
I love that you just used the word excited. I'm also aware that I'm tearful as well as excited, because there's something about both the power and the delight of reconnection and the mourning for all that was lost or interrupted or taken away. And what that's, I think part of what the dark night of the soul is a reckoning with the cost of that, not just to us individually, but us in our various us's. And it always amazes me that something that when we are on our knees wrestling in the early days feels so private, so individual, so shameful some of the time, or unshareable, unspeakable. It is actually about so much more than us as little individual isolated units, as we're so often taught to think of ourselves in the sort of dominant culture.
There's so much in what you were saying, because some of the biggest piece of work that I bring to the world right now is kind of grief tending, and not kind of just traditional grief tending, but kind of just allowing grief to be spoken about. Because that kind of privacy, that need to because the dark night of the soul is a grief process. I don't see it as dissimilar to that. And for me, and as a grief process, we have not created a world. We have not. The dominant society hasn't created a world where grief is something that is done in public. And every experience that I have, I'll give you an example. So I was on a organizational group training course that was Gestalt. It was a form of therapy. And we were kind of talking about, like, this was a story that was shared with me. They were a team of people who were training us, who went out to Africa on various in various situations. And they were called in to support what was happening in the Rwanda genocide. I mean, so awful. And they went running over and went, so we're here, we'll do this one-to-one therapy with you. And the Rwandans just basically said, we're not going to sit in a room with you. We're going to dance it. We're going to chant it. We're going to sing it. We're going to do all the things that we do in community, this collective way of dealing with our trauma. That's how we're going to do it. So no, this doesn't work for us. We're not sitting in a room with you. Yeah. And for me, that's the work that I do, which is bring these processes into groups. Because, if it's shared, then we realize there's no need to put it behind closed doors. Dark nights of the soul in other traditions are brought to the community. We deal with it together. We tend to you together. And mine was private. There were friends. I was supported. But I'm watching a friend of mine has been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's quite aggressive. It's great. This sounds quite an odd thing to say, but it's great because she's been having chemo and it's gone, and the lumps reduced by 2 centimeters. So it's all moving in the right direction. But the reason I share it is I have never seen anything like it. She's a really, really old friend. And when this happened, we were all like, we all need to club together and look after her. The way the women in her, because I live about 5 hours away from her, the way the women have looked after her in the process of her grief with the experience that's happening in her breast makes my heart sing, of what happens when we tend to people in a collective, as a collective. Everything becomes easier because it's normalized, because we're regulated with each other. We just know what to do because we can all take our parts and look after each other. So the dark night of the soul, I think the dominant culture has taught us that it's behind closed doors. I don't believe it's behind closed doors for other cultures.
Yes. And I think there's something then about the way that we bring it out from behind those closed doors. For me, holding the space for a group or a gathering, as I call it, once a month is certainly one of the things I do. And I wonder sometimes about the kind of, that I think when we're in the early phases of it, it's difficult to see everything that you just so beautifully described. And I'm thinking back to my 2007 self on my knees, feeling like a catastrophic failure. Going back to what you were saying about not fitting in or being different, all of that coming to the fore together with the shame of not being able to function and all of that, and how I would have responded to what we're talking about now. And I think on the one hand, there would have been a real sense of relief in it, a sense of like, wow, other people are actually talking about this, and also a real fear, a kind of hiding, still a hiding of that. And I guess that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have these conversations, to say, even though it feels like often we're the only people in this, we're absolutely not. And I think throughout time and in all sorts of different places, humans go through this. This is a deeply human experience. And it doesn't come about because we've done something wrong or that we've somehow failed to heal or all of the other ways that could be construed. Just to come back to what you said about the collective, I think one of the things we're mourning in the dark night is our lack of or loss of that in whatever ways that's happened for each of us individually. There's often a deep sense of absence, I think, and certainly an absence of that.
I think there's a lack of language around it as well, because I think that when I think about what community means to me, it means at some level, the simplest part of it is knowing that someone has taken themselves off, like noticing they're missing. And we've created this dominant society is one where we don't even notice sometimes. And the idea that I am that I continue to dance with, which is that two truths can be true at one time. There can be more than one truth. And so I need to go away to tend to myself. And how might I lean in? Both those things are possible. And that sounds quite strange because the way we've been conditioned, socialized, packaged means that every system only knows what it knows. It can't know what it doesn't know. And so the whole body is telling you, you need to run, you need to hide, you need to be in a cave because no one wants to see what's happening with you right now. You're no good to it, whatever the words are in your head. And how might it be to know that actually the contact is okay? It's okay for you to show up in your messiness. Just for a moment. Just how might it be to lean into that? Because at that point, you're choosing to do something differently and you're creating a new neural pathway, which your body is learning from too, and still be in your cave. Like just this dance, make it all. I suppose my invitation is, how might we be more gentle with ourselves when we move into these places? Because the dark night of the soul, just by virtue of the fact that's what it is, feels harsh. And I feel like there's a harshness to how we might treat ourselves. And I wonder whether or not and I know that was what it was for me. There was like this, like lots of swear words, like, really? We're doing this again? And it's deeper this time, and I'm on my knees now, and I can't function, and I failed at this and that. But the words and the argument, the internal argument that I was having in my head, and like literal, just constant thoughts that were really negative, and I couldn't escape myself. couldn't escape
Yeah.
the part of myself that thought it was okay to talk to me like this. It was like everywhere I went, it was. And so that actually, because that's the thing I'm really learning about this, two truths can be like there at the same time, is that everything seems to be inverted. It's like the wrong way up, right? And so if it's the wrong way up, then actually what this voice that's shouting at me saying, telling me all the things that are unhelpful is actually telling me you need to be in contact with someone else. You can't do this by yourself. This needs more than you, is what that voice is saying, although the opposite is what's happening in my body and in my head.
I love that you've brought up the inversion. I mean, my sense is that during the dark night and subsequently, we get to see that how things have been inverted over and over and over again. And there's that sense of, oh, I thought that was that, but actually it's a 180 flip in the opposite direction. And that voice you were describing is the kind of internalized voice of what we've been talking about as dominant society. And I think when we really, really get to feel that the harshness of that, when we really have that embodied experience of, oh my God, finally I can actually feel the cruelty, the hardness in that. My sense is that then that the gentleness and kindness starts to sort of begin to come in, not necessarily consistently at first, but over time, I think there's more and more a wearing away, or as it were, or a falling away of that critical voice. And, what comes to mind is something that I hear a lot from people in this space, is the moment at which there's a coming in of a feeling sorry for ourselves, and a feeling actual sorrow and grief for ourselves for having been through what we've been through in all the different ways that we have. And how often that voice will be critical of that, it'll be saying, oh, this is, I shouldn't feel sorry for myself, is something that we hear so often. And yet that's the moment in which there can be the sort of first tastes of like, oh, this is what it is to be kind to myself. This is what it is to feel that internal gentleness.
And I think I just want to, yes, I completely agree. And I think there's because that voice is always running anyway. That voice has been running since we were kind of socialized and conditioned, that critical, that voice. And I think the dark night of the soul turns it up to a level where you can't not hear it and you have to respond to it. And so it's, what do I do with this now? And that's why, there are examples of people who have experienced psychosis because of this, because they haven't been able to be anywhere near the gentleness, and it's just been turned up and turned up and turned up. And so getting to a place where, because kind of when you say feel sorry for yourself, the place that we can typically end up in as a starting point is victim. And then it becomes kind of an outwards experience, which is everyone did this to me. And actually that internal voice that's being turned up is actually asking you to tend to the part of yourself that needs you to grieve. And so it's not externalized anymore. So there's a turning up of the voice gets so loud because it's shouting at you to tend to you. That's what it's asking you to do, rather than keep making it something on the outside. It's like now. And if you don't tend to you, it just gets louder.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what makes the dark night different to what precedes it, in that somehow before that we managed to work around it, evade it, do whatever we were doing. And I love what you say about it being turned up so far that it just can't, like there's no way of escaping it, is there? And I think because we're so often also viscerally immersed in in the sensations and feelings of it, it's so completely unavoidable. And I think for me, just going back to what you said about the dark night of the soul as a grief process, yeah, absolutely. And it feels like it starts with I think, a true recognition of the reality of the ways in which we were victimized and the ways in which we were hurt, and the absolute sort of realness of that seems to then start attending, which can open up to also begin to countenance and include all the ways we've been doing that to ourselves. That we take all of that in and then we perpetuate it internally. And for me, in the dark night, that was the real kicker, in a sense. I was familiar to some extent with the pain of being, done unto in various ways. But that the seeing of how we've perpetuated that system within ourselves is like, whoa, I mean, that's just, I think, what makes it so painful. And yet it's the seeing of that which opens up the capacities that you've been describing, of like being able to be on your knees, but with more robustness, or with dancing.
I mean, literally, I mean, I would say that the dancing, I mean, I use dance as a expression for me, but I would actually say just the word dance with it, like, as far as seeing it as this idea that, and I keep going back to this, like, there can be more than one truth, just like I can dance in between them. I can move to those parts of my body where I feel resourced, and then where I don't. And, can I lean into the part that feels a bit scary? Because I think that what, at some level, what we're talking about here as well is, how might it be not to be scared of your human experience? How might it be to be able to be with yourself no matter what you are shown? And the dark night of the soul took me to a place where I was shown my shadows, shown the parts of me that, just the reason I'm stopping is because, I really always have this issue with words like shadow and darkness, and the way the connotations of that in a society has created a whole society based around kind of whiteness. It's got like, this is darkness, and that's not true. So the parts of me which are not as favoured by me as other parts, and I was brought to my knees with that, and I was scared of my experience because these conversations are not had. And so I suppose what I'm saying with that is, I really appreciate that you do this work, that I do grief work and technically shadow work, and all of and the kind of work that I do too, and so many others do now, where we can lean in and realize there's nothing to be scared about in a human experience. If you can just be with it in gentleness, even if it feels really uncomfortable, then something quite magic comes out of it. And it always, always comes to an end. It always comes to an end, because the whole system, the whole body, the whole experience of being human actually always moves towards balance. That's all it ever wants. That's all it's ever trying to do. And so if we can just bear the bits that feel awful, and I'm not very good at it sometimes, but I'm better than I was.
Yes, like 1,000 times. I just love that question. How might it be to not be scared of the human experience? And just to say, that includes being scared. We're not in any way saying, don't be scared of the human experience. Many times when I'm with myself in that way, I tend to be lying down, lying on the floor, lying on the sofa. And I think when what you just said really lands, that we can be with more than one truth simultaneously, in my experience, what starts to happen is the kind of opening up of a space that is both in us and around us, or us and not us, that is a space of true unconditionality and love, that isn't us being unconditional. it is a place or a space in which we can unconditionally be just as we are in that moment, and in which anything we're feeling, thinking, whatever's going on within our experience can be as it is. And I think once we start to experience that, we start to experience the profound relief in that. And as you say, it's hit and miss. Absolutely. Same for me. There are days when we're 100% in that, and other days it's like, oh, this is just, and yet I think the more we're able to hold that kind of truths on multiple levels, the more that space opens up and the more we can be with whatever's here, be it grief or rage or, all of the other many things that might be here, with nothing excluded or censored. Or, I really appreciate what you said about words like shadow and darkness and all the connotations of that, because I think when we remove the idea of some things being positive or things being negative, or then I think we open up the space in which this, coming back to the sense of ourselves as creatures, this creature can just be what it is in the moment with, and that's all it ever actually really wants to be, is my sense.
Yes. I know, I just have to keep agreeing because I'm just with I love that we've been, that our generation have been forced to question gender, as an example, right? And the fluidity of it. And that for me is kind of like what we're trying to say, which is just that, how might we be open to all animal, human experience? Like, we are all of it. And so that just means that, like, when someone to come and say they're non-binary, and I love the fact that whenever I've been in conversations, like I can use my masculinity here and I can use my feminine, and I don't need the labels. It just is what it is, and it just flows the way it flows. And it's for me, that's no different to what I'm suggesting that we're doing in this, which is, I can be in my anger and I can flow to my laughter and I can be in my joy and then I can be in my sadness. And how might I allow all of that to just be as fluid as it is, and know that my words as I say them right now, like for some that are listening, they might think, oh yeah, but it's not easy for any of us at any time. But how might we move towards it with, I really find it hard to do what it is I'm saying. And I try, because I know when I do, what comes off the back of it is more of me.
That makes so much sense. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for people to know that what we're talking about is so hard won. And it comes from being willing, I think, or just finding ourselves in the space where we just keep coming back to our actual experience in the moment over and over and over and over again. We've spent many thousands of hours doing what we're talking about. And I think there is something in the kind of commitment to ourselves in that, to see that once we can trust the process that's happening anyway, and to start to follow where we're being drawn, that everything we just talked about opens up. And I love your example of non-binary, because I think that's a really important exploration in terms of our gender, but in terms of everything else too, breaking down the binary that exists across all kinds of experience. Then there's a sense, or my experience is that there's a sense then, as we stay with ourselves over time, of, oh, even this too. And there's a letting in, or a seeing of what we've been keeping outside, what we've been exiling or excluding in some way, either knowingly or unknowingly. And every time there's a sort of almost like an increase in our capacity, there's a systemic, profound, energetic relief in that, I think, of no longer having to sort of hold these positions, but being able to flow like you just described between all of these different things that might be here.
I think there's two things. One is my favourite poem is "Call Me by My True Names," Thich Nhat Hanh. And I don't know if you've read it or come across it, but it is the most gorgeous thing where and that's a weird word to attach to it, because he basically says I am, and I won't be able to remember it because I can never remember anything because I'm still perimenopausal, but um I mean, he literally says I am the child being raped, and I am the person who's raping, and literally, so it's each shadow is given, like, so the bit that we will cry for in the world right now, and go and point our fingers and say, "You are wrong." And then we won't own the fact that that part exists in us too. And that's what the dark night of the soul calls me to, which is, "Oh, no, I do that too. Oh, no, that's me." And in a way that, like, is not like, that kind of like a lot of new age spirituality will kind of be like, "Well, we all are mirrors of each other, and we all," not like that. It's not passive, and it's not and it's not kind of like all love and light. It's actually like, "Oh," and I'm gonna swear, "Oh, fuck, I do that too." And I spend a lot of time in, like, the world right now with, like, watching what's happening and seeing evil perpetrated, and then still knowing that that's in me too. Like, you extrapolate, and that's where I end up, because that's me. And if I can bear to be with the experience, "Oh my God, I harm too," then that's what my dark note of the soul kinda gave me. And I just want to share one other thing that just kept coming up in my head. Before I got onto this podcast, all I was with was Carly Simon's "It's Coming Around Again." I'm like, if you're willing to play the game, it's coming around again, right? And I would just had that song, and it's been in my head, and I'm just like, that's the song for this podcast, which, if you're willing to play the game, it's coming around again, because it will keep coming until such time as you go, "Oh, you're here. I hear you, and I love you. And how might I kind of take your hand, and let's go and do this together," is kind of how I see it.
Yes, that's so beautifully put. I know there's so much more we could get into, but I just wanted to ask before we finish, for anybody who is right in it, who's on their knees at the moment, what would you like to share?
Such a difficult word, but the word would be trust. Um, the word is trust. And it would be trust. And if there's enough capacity to think about the opposite thing you are doing right now, if it feels like you need to be in your cave, completely appreciate that. And how might you dare to lean into something that could be nourishing, even if it's small, even if it's a phone call or a walk or sitting with a tree, because nature's one of the best things to support us, because there's no conversation there, but there is so much conversation. So my word would be trust and get outside.
Lovely. Yes, to all of that. Jax, is there anything else that comes to you that wants to be shared?
Yeah, just may everything that we've done here today.
Yes, the invocation.
So just taking a minute to close our eyes and just be with ourselves for a moment. And just seeing what is here for us as individuals. And just allowing the individual to be the us now. What moves between us? The space between us, the space between everyone listening to us. What intentions we might put in there that swirl amongst us. And may all of these intentions, everything that we've shared today, however it supports you, however it supports me, be for the greatest good of everyone. And so it is.
Jax, thank you so much.
Thank you, my darling. That was glorious. Absolutely glorious. Really, really lovely to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.